This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And welcome back to the Primetime Podcast here on Most Valuable Podcast. And Brandon, this is it. This is the show that we have been sort of waiting for. The kind of culmination of everything we've talked about all season. Who's in, who's out. Well, there's no more discussions or predictions or this or that. We know the college football playoff teams, and they are Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Washington. We're going to get into those. We're also today going to get into the Heisman and then Leonard Fournette being drafted because he declared for the draft today. But I want to get right into this playoff discussion. No silly banter about how was your weekend. We got to dive right into this because Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Washington are our final four teams. Penn State, Michigan, Oklahoma left out. I'm going to hit you with the simple question, Brandon. Did the committee get it right?
Well, as usual, no, they didn't. And I think that I just don't. I don't know. I don't think Washington should be there at number 4 after what we saw with Penn State. I just don't. And I think that that's because I understand, Washington wins their conference championship. Penn State wins their conference championship. Ohio State doesn't even play for a conference championship. Clemson wins a close one against VT. I think that Penn State, again, it's a word that you've said, a term that you've used, and you've been like, I don't really want to use it, but I'm going to use it. The overall body of work, it looks better for Penn State. Penn State's a more competitive team, I think. Washington has certainly, I don't think, gone up against the kind of types of teams that Penn State has. I think Penn State should be there. Other people would actually say Michigan should be there as well. You could probably make the case that Penn State and Michigan should both be in there at 11-2 and 10-2, both respectively. I would also say that Oklahoma should be in there. If it were really up to me, I'd put Alabama, Penn State, Michigan, and Oklahoma. And you're probably going, Brandon, you're bat shit crazy, and that's okay, but I'm probably putting them because of the fact that I think they will give Alabama a better run, and I think that those will be the better games against what ultimately I think are better teams. And I say Oklahoma, and I know they're all the way down. They end down at 7. Very close. But they end at 7, and I think it's because you take a look at this Oklahoma team, and Ricky, I was talking to you about it before we came on tonight, is that Oklahoma did something good that I really liked. They scheduled some tough games at the beginning of the season. They scheduled some tough games at the end of the season, and then they had a couple other games in between and stuff like that. But I like that they did that. There's teams that they'll put their tougher games either at the beginning or at the end, not both places. And I think for Oklahoma, that's what they did. And they lost 2 games early on in the season to a Houston team who I still give credit to as a good team, as a tough team, and to Ohio State. But I think that what they did and how they ended the season, just like Penn State, they ended on a roll and on a very hot streak. So I really think that you can make a case for Oklahoma to be there, certainly for Michigan and for Penn State. Another thing that, Ricky, that you and I talked about, and I'm trying not to be too long-winded here. I've probably already gone past that point. But Clemson, a weak team this season, as opposed to what we saw last season. Clemson fans, I don't want you to get mad at me. I'm saying it's a weaker team as opposed to what we saw last season, especially from a defensive standpoint, I think. Ohio State, they're a team that, offensively, they have really blown out some teams, but then on the same token, they have also looked lifeless. That they couldn't do anything against a couple of teams like a Northwestern team that wasn't all that wonderful this season. They struggled. They won, but they struggled. And then a Washington team that I think has that's been a team that has won a lot of games this season, But again, it's the question I've been asking all season of the Washington Huskies. Who are you playing? You know, if we wanted to go by, you won a lot of games or you didn't have any losses, Western Michigan should be in. Western Michigan should be one of the teams in. You know,
row the boat, baby. Row the boat.
But see, that's one of the things is that you can't just look at, they got a lot of wins. No, the Western Michigan wouldn't stand a chance against any of the other teams that are in this playoff. But I think, obviously, you know, Alabama is right. But I think, you know what the problem, I think, is?
What?
And I talked about it today. We were sending text messages back and forth with a lot of the guys here from MVP.
Mainly Mike and Sean.
But the problem is Alabama. The problem is Alabama because they're too good. And I think it's because all the other teams, they have not stepped up to the plate to be on the same level as Alabama. I think maybe they're trying, but I think they're seeing that you're not going to have as much respect if you're not at that level of Alabama. And if you take Alabama away, there's more parity. These games look a lot better, a lot closer. But Alabama is there, and they're not going away. And I think that other teams need to step up their game to try and get there. And right now, I just don't think enough teams have done it.
Well, and you've said a lot there, and there's a lot of teams that go after, and I want to dissect as much as we can. But some of the things that I'm kind of formulating in my head while listening to you talk there was I took out some points. The first one, I'll start with the last one you had, the Alabama comparison. The thing that I look at, and I pulled up right now every single team in pretty much in the top 6 almost, where you look at the first game that they played opening week. Michigan played Hawaii, blew them out. Some would say not that strong of an opponent. Clemson, you played Auburn, you won 19-13. I'll give you that one. You went out, you scheduled a team from the SEC on the road. You went into Auburn and won that game. Ohio,
and also remember, Auburn wasn't ranked at the time, but they turned out to be a very strong team this season.
Now, the one thing I'll say about Ohio State, and maybe Michigan can fall into this too, they didn't schedule tough opponents opening day. Bowling Green was Ohio State's opening game, but they still went out of the conference to play good teams. Michigan played a good Colorado team this year, who everyone didn't expect them to be good, but they were the second best team in the Pac-12 this year. And Ohio State went out and played Oklahoma. An Oklahoma team that if they would have won week 1 against Houston, it would have been a 2-0, 2-0 matchup when Ohio State went into Norman to play Oklahoma.
Sorry, Ricky. I'm sorry. I know that I already had my talking time, but
you're passionate about this.
But I think that if you go back and you turn back time and Oklahoma beats Houston or they beat Ohio State, all they would have needed is one of those wins and they're in. That would have been only one loss. They win the Big 12. And if everything else would have happened the same way, it would have been one loss, they win the Big 12, and they would have had one more quality, quote-unquote quality win under their belt. Oklahoma, we'd be sitting here, Oklahoma would be a playoff team, certainly over Washington.
And Oklahoma with theirs, they were risky too. They go and play Ohio State. They open up the season neutral site. Basically, it's, and I'm using air quotes, neutral site. It was a home game for Houston. That was in Houston. It was in a pro stadium, but it was in Houston. It was in their backyard. It was a home game for the Cougars. They went in there. They scheduled tough opponents. The two teams that it comes down to me, Washington and Penn State. The 4 and the 5 team that we have right now. And to me, it is very simple. Don't have to look at the conference schedule. The Big Ten is better. Don't tell me otherwise. What I look at is your non-conference. Rutgers, Idaho, Portland State for Washington, Kent State, Pitt, Temple for the Nittany Lions. Now, you could say, well, Ricky, on an average of rankings and strength of schedule and this and that, Penn State might win in that department. But I'm just going to go for one game each. I'm putting Rutgers up against Pitt. Those are out of those 3 games, the non-conference games, those were the 2 highest in both of those teams' schedule. Which one? I know Penn State lost to Pitt by 3, but also Clemson did too, and they're in the playoff. Pitt is a better opponent than Rutgers. And Washington, I mean, I got nothing to complain about with them. You can complain that they shouldn't be in the playoff, and I would agree with you. But in the end, Washington did what Washington had to do. They made a schedule that they thought would make it to the playoff. And that's the thing that you can kind of blame on the committee, I think. Because we sit here and we go, well, you got to get stronger opponents. You got to do this, you got to do that. But these coaches are sitting there going, well, wait. If I don't have to do that, I'm not going to do that. You know what I'm saying? Washington went out, made this schedule because their main thought was, we want to be in a position to win the Pac-12. And then it became, we can make the college football playoff as they got into Pac-12 territory. That's what this falls on. The committee going out there and rewarding teams with a schedule like that, because basically if I'm any other team, that hurts college football because no one else does what Alabama did. Oh, that's right. I didn't tell you who they played week 1. They went out and played the number 20th team in the nation. I know you're saying, 1 versus 20, it's still a blowout. But they went out and played USC at a neutral site, which was still a big game coming in. So Alabama not afraid to schedule those big-time opponents.
And see, that's the thing that the rest of the teams can't be afraid of either. If you want to be able to get into the college football playoff, you need to be able to take some risks. You need to be able to
go out your
schedule.
Comfort zone.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of the issue, is that teams, they think that if you have that record, that if you're 12-0 at the end of the season or 11-1, you still have a good chance of making the college football playoff. No, that's not necessarily the case, because if you have not scheduled good teams, quality teams, they're going to look at you and they're going to look at you as, Western Michigan, you're gonna have a pretty good spot in the rankings throughout the season. But when it comes down to it at the very end, you're not going to be in the playoffs because you just didn't play good teams. That's not the point. The point is not to win all your games. The point is to play quality teams and then beat those teams to look like a quality team. If you lose one time, clearly it's showing that you can lose one time, maybe 2 times. If you've had a very, very good schedule, if you played well throughout that schedule, if you tried to play the best of the best, because you believe you're the best of the best, you go out there and play the best of the best. I do have an issue with Washington getting in, especially over Penn State. The problem with that is, if Penn State doesn't get blown out by Michigan, I think they are in the college football playoff. The committee looked at that blowout by Michigan. Ooh, you lost by 39. I don't think we can have a team that lost by that much, that margin of victory, which, gosh, that's something the committee has done before too, margin of victory. I don't think that if they didn't lose by that much, I do not think that they would have been kicked out of this playoff. Also, you have to look at the game they played, that Penn State played against Wisconsin. They won 38-31 in a game where they were down significantly early on in the game. They showed resilience. When has Washington showed resilience?
Never.
I mean, help me out here.
I mean, maybe the USC game, but they lost.
Help me out with that. When has Washington shown resilience? Maybe Utah, to be able to hang on and win that game. They haven't been tested in that way. You know, you say Colorado's a good team, which clearly they showed that they were good enough this season to be up there. They got blown out by Washington. There was no challenge there. I'm really trying not to rag on them, but there's too much that I'm seeing with some of these other teams that did not make it in, that have a better pedigree than Washington did this season, in a weak, let me say it again, weak Pac-12 this season. Well, it was really, really disheartening, I think, for the Pac-12 overall, because if you look at them, they were not that good. The next best after Washington on the north side was Washington State at 8-4. Then after that, Stanford at 9-3, Cal at 5-7. On the south side, Colorado won it at 10-3, USC at 9-3, then Utah at 8-4, and it goes from there. Washington clearly was standing out at 12-1, and then 8-1 in the conference. But I still think that you have to look at the other conferences and see how they played this season and see how strong they were this season. clearly, the Big Ten was very strong. SEC is always strong. I just think that with the way that Penn State really geared up towards the end of the season, they did really well. I also think, and I'm going to stick with Oklahoma on this one, I think that Oklahoma did a really good job of scheduling tough opponents. And unfortunately, they lost to two of those tough opponents, but they scheduled them. They were not afraid to schedule them. That was in the beginning of the season when they struggled. They ended very strong. I also think in mind, we're humans. We are humans. So we're obviously looking at, okay, we know Alabama's good. Who's going to be able to compete against them? Not Washington, not the Huskies. And I'll be happy to eat my words if they compete against Alabama. Happy to, Sean Anderson. But I think that ultimately at the end of the day, you have to at least look at the fact that we want to be able to have some good TV so we can, make money, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, if no one watches, we're not going to make money. Yeah.
No. You schedule some teams, and you can pop some teams in there that are going to be better. Oklahoma has the offense to be able to do it. I just don't know if Washington has the offense to be able to keep up against that Alabama defense. And the reason, and people will say, well, Brandon, they both have offenses that are elite offenses. I think that Baker Mayfield and that crew more so because they've been playing again in the Big 12 where their offense is just better.
You know who Washington should be thanking? They should be writing thank you cards from every single player on that team to Iowa. And the reason why I say that is one thing that I believe, and I know this is the part of the podcast where you go, well, Ricky, woulda, coulda, shoulda. It doesn't matter, but I'm still going to bring this up because I believe this to be true. If Michigan never loses to Iowa, Michigan is the fourth team behind Ohio State. And the reason why I say that, here's the reason I say that. Here's the reason. So if Michigan would have never lost to Iowa, I think our playoff would have been Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Michigan. That would have been our playoff. And the reason I say that is when Michigan lost to Iowa, didn't move in the rankings. Did not move in the college football rankings. They stayed pat right there at number 3. They did not move until they lost to Ohio State, and they only fell 2. The way I'm thinking of it, and of course this is a kind of conspiracy, but also kind of just a woulda, coulda, shoulda situation. If they don't lose to Iowa, they stay at 3 anyways. Then let's say they do lose to Ohio State, but how they lost to Ohio State, do you move them? Do you say, okay, you move to 4. They're still in with 1 loss, and then they don't play the conference championship week because Penn State would be playing for that. And then I think how it plays out is Clemson jumps Ohio State, and Michigan's sitting there at 4. Then we have Michigan, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, or reverse because our Clemson would be the home team. That's who Washington should be thanking. And the thing that I want to say, this is to Oklahoma and Penn State fans, because I know you guys are upset. Oklahoma fans, because you guys went out there, you scheduled 2 tough opponents. You went after Tom Herman in Houston, got bit in Houston. Then you went after Ohio State, and you got the wrath of Urban Meyer. That's basically how that went down. But the one thing you guys can hang your hat on, who's coming back next season? Who said he's not going to the NFL? Who's coming back for his senior season? Baker Mayfield. You can hang your hat on that. You will be just as good next year because you have a quarterback who can get you there. With Penn State, I'm going to use, and this is me, I'm taking this as I always do, as I was waiting for you to come home from work so we could record this podcast, Brandon. I was like, I'm going to watch what Colin Cowherd thought of the college football playoff. And he used an analogy that is now my favorite analogy in the entire world. And it's as simple as this. He said he heard it from a commencement speech way back when YouTube first started. He said, but here's how it goes. Outline your life in pencil, not in pen. And he was bringing that up because the point is outline it in pencil because then you can erase pencil. Don't trap yourself in a box by outlining everything in pen. And to relate that to Penn State, I'm looking down your depth chart right now. 5 players. You have 5 starters that are for sure gone. Those are seniors. You have 5 starters who are seniors. You are returning most of your team. Most of your team. So you are still going to be in a great position next year to not only make the college football playoffs, hell, I'll even say it. There might be people next year picking you guys to win the whole thing. That's how good your roster is, bringing back so many players, especially on the starting front. And you look at the schedule for next year for Penn State, you guys play Akron, Pittsburgh, and Georgia State. Those are your non-conference games. Pitt, again, is your hardest non-conference game, and you can beat them. I know you can. You have it in you. Your toughest games after that, you're going to Iowa. That'll be a tough one. You play Michigan at home. You could beat Michigan at home, but your toughest game of the year, October 28th, 2017, when they're not coming to town this time, you're going into the Horseshoe to play Urban Meyer and the Ohio State Buckeyes. And the reason why I liked that analogy that Cowherd used, the don't box yourself in or don't outline your life in with pen is what I'm trying to say, is by you saying right now, we should be in, we have the conference title. We should be in, we have the conference title. Guess what could happen next year? Next year, you guys could win every single game, lose to Ohio State, not play for the conference title, and get in. What happened for Ohio State this year could happen for you next year. So don't complain about it right now. Lick your chops. Say, you know what? I don't agree with you. But you know what? We're going to be in good shape because our coach ain't going anywhere. No one's talking about James Franklin going to the NFL, going to a different job. He's staying put. You're returning a ton of players. Next year could be your year, is what I'm trying to say.
And no one's talking about James Franklin being on the hot seat either, because that was one thing coming into this season. He was possibly on the hot seat. He was on the hot seat. He needed to have a really good season, and he has done just that. He's had an outstanding season. I think that there's plenty of room for these players to be upset because of the season that they had, and certainly of the middle part of the season and the second half that they had. I mean, after that win against, and I don't care that it was at home. I don't care that it wasn't on the road at Ohio State in the Horseshoe. That does not matter to me. You beat Ohio State, and that's like beating up on Big Brother. And I think that after that win, that just propelled them not only to score more points and blow teams out, but I just think it propelled them. They just had a better, I think, attitude, feel. It seemed like something was just special with that team from Penn State. So I feel for those guys not being able to make it in to the college football playoffs this season. Ricky, one interesting thing. I sent it to you on Twitter over the weekend.
And I believe I retweeted if it's the same thing I'm thinking about.
I believe it was. And it was PSU Football U. And the quote was, quote, "If you don't win your conference, you shouldn't be playing for a national championship," end quote. Urban Meyer back in 2006. And I know that is years and years ago, what feels like years and years ago. But how interesting him saying that way back when, and now his team does not win a conference championship, and they are in, and the team that does is sitting on the sidelines.
It's funny that you say that, because today as I went into work and I kind of looked at the ESPN kind of headlines as I was waiting for my email to load up and my computer to kind of wake up from being asleep all weekend, one of the things, and I have not watched it yet, have not had time, but it's like a short minute video of Urban Meyer, and on ESPN, the headline reads, "Meyer sympathizes with Penn State." And I found that funny. You tweeted that at me, and then I saw this, where Urban Meyer to me seems like a guy where He said it, but he's not going to retract on like, oh, I didn't mean it. Now I mean something different. No, it sucks being, and I'm going to throw Oklahoma into this basket with Penn State. I'm sorry, you're not alone. I'm bringing the boys from Norman in with me because they deserve this talk too. It sucks. It absolutely sucks to win your conference title and watch someone else who didn't get in. But you know what? Sometimes, and this is the life talk, sometimes that happens in life. You feel like you deserve something, someone else gets it. What do? If that happened in real life, what do? Do you sit there and complain and say that person shouldn't have got it? Or do you say, you know what, we got to get to work. We're getting to work for next year. Of course, they got a bowl game. They got USC.
I think that
you get my point.
I think that what these teams obviously have to do is they should pull out some Play-Doh and some coloring books and do exactly what so many people did after the election. I think that would really help to calm them down and really ease any of the tensions.
What I'm saying, my point being, is Penn State, you guys, in Oklahoma, you guys have Baker Mayfield, but Penn State, you have so much to hang your hat on next year. And I know that it sucks hearing that now, but just wait. Just wait, and this is, I'm gonna pull something out here. This is a Cubs fan telling you he knows how you feel. Just wait. You know how crushed I was when the Mets swept us in the NLCS. I thought, you know what? I thought the absolute worst. This could be like when the Nats could have won it. They shut down Strasburg, never went back. There's no guarantee. We might not win the World Series. What happened this year? The Cubs won the World Series. Talk to me a year from now when Penn State is in the college football playoff, because it could happen. It could happen theoretically with the team you are bringing back and your schedule.
I think that's nice that you're saying that stuff, Ricky. But I think personally, it's too early to look at next season already. I think that what you have to look forward to is you have to look forward to that pretty Rose Bowl game, and it is going to be a lot of fun. I think that you're looking at two really good teams. USC, they had a really poor start to their season.
They're another team that could have been in the talk if they didn't fuck up in September.
If they didn't have a rough September, they would have been certainly in some conversations, I think, still probably left out, but they certainly would have been in conversations. And I think that if they didn't have such a crummy September, I think they would have popped right over Washington. But I think that's what these Nittany Lions and the Trojans have to look forward to, is this Rose Bowl game. You want to prove people? You want to show people that you should have put me in the big game? Because Rose Bowl, it's a big game. It's a big game, but I don't think that we're going to have the type of game that we had last year with Stanford and with Iowa. I don't think we're going to have that at all. It's not going to be a blowout. We're going to see a good game here. I think that, again, both teams have certainly something to prove, and it's to prove people wrong, especially for the Nittany Lions to say, you know what? You were wrong. You should have put us in. We deserve to be in, and we came to play today, and we're showing you that we deserved to be in that championship game if they would have gotten there, because they could have at least had a spot in the playoffs. But, you know, we could honestly, if you take a look at things, Ricky, and you obviously have the four playoff teams of Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Washington, but you could realistically make a case for 6 through 9 to be in, with Michigan, 5 through 9, Penn State, Michigan, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and USC. Personally, with Wisconsin being the weakest case in my mind. Personally.
Well, and I mean, Wisconsin, the only thing that I say the weakest case is, look at, like, they were up by halftime, thought that it was in the bag. Badgers are going to win. Badgers are the Big Ten champs. And then, like, I go to turn on the ACC championship game because it was getting close at the end. Oh, Penn State won. I'm like, what? What? Well, Wisconsin was just up by so much. How did they lose? And to me, just to kind of wrap up this entire discussion, every single year we're going to have things to complain about.
To discuss. I'd like to say discuss, not complain.
Well, I'm talking about as the collective, like me and you having a discussion. Me, you, the fans of Most Valuable Podcasts who are going to tell us what they think in our comment section, are going to have a discussion. But for some people, it is complaining about what happened. And I mean, we get it every single year. I mean, I can pull up last year's rankings, and the big one that people were talking about a whole year ago was Iowa. Oh, Iowa should have been in. They're a one-loss team, should have been in over Oklahoma, this and that. Oh, what about Stanford? What about Ohio State should have been in? And then you've got the year before in 2014 where people are talking about TCU Baylor. Oh, TCU Baylor, one of them should be in. It doesn't matter that neither of them won their conference title. There's going to be something like this every year because guess what, Brandon? It doesn't matter if you have 4 teams, if you have 6 teams, if you have 8 teams, if you have 68 teams. Guess what? That next team is always going to think they should have been in.
Always. And see, that's the reason why so many people can say, you know, we should go to 8 teams. Like you just said, we should go to 8 teams. Well, when a team gets snubbed at 9, oh, well, it should be 12. Oh, it should be 16. Oh, you know what? Let's just make it 64 like college basketball.
Yep.
No. 4 right now certainly works. I on this show I have said and tried to make a case for 8, but right now 4 is working. You're always going to have someone snubbed. Welcome to this game called life. You're always going to get snubbed in something at some point. You got to move on, grow, and get better.
What's one thing you told me before we hit the record button about an 8-game playoff? About this year in an 8-game playoff that might not have been the same for last year, Brandon. What did you say?
Oh, I said that this year an 8-game playoff may have worked. Last year, maybe not the case. Next year, maybe not the case.
Each year's different.
Each year is different. Each year, but I'm telling you, though, too, each year the committee will look for something new. It's what they do. You know, next year, it's all body of work. 2018, it's margin of victory. 2019,
it's conference championships again.
2019, we moved to a 2-game playoff, and it's Alabama playing Alabama.
So we're going back to the BCS, is basically what you're saying. Which, I'm going to get his name wrong. Chris Fowler, ESPN, said that on the selection show, I thought it was funny, where he goes, Reese is ready to wrap it up with his interview. He goes, you know, Reese, I got one more thing to say. I know that nobody likes talking about the BCS anymore, but you go ahead and look back at those rankings. Most of the time, it got the best 2 teams right at the end of the day. And everyone wanted to crucify the BCS for what it did. But guess what? Apparently they did it again this year just for fun, and the top 2 teams were Alabama, Clemson. So the committee, or the top 4 teams, were the same 4 teams the committee picked. So that was Chris Fowler's way of saying the BCS wasn't completely wrong in that sense when it came to playoff teams and national champions.
And I was going to say, you know, how much more effective would it be if we
just let a computer do it?
Let a computer do it based on a criteria that it has to go by, looking at all the different factors that the committee looks at per year. But the committee always focuses on one factor, it seems like. If you could put in all these factors, you know, margin of victory, strength of schedule, scheduling, all these different things that a computer would then have to take that all into effect each year, we may get it right. We're never going to get it right.
No,
a computer can't get everything right, and humans certainly will get things wrong.
Someone is always going to be left out and sitting at the kids' table at the end of the day. That's how
and that's
Thanksgiving
why we
goes.
have 72 bowl games, so no one ever feels left
Hey
out
man,
in the cold.
North Texas got in, and they're a sub 500 team. So you don't even have to win 6 games anymore to get into a bowl game. Think of that. Think of that for a second. But we're going to move on. Before we do, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. We went on for this one. This is probably the longest discussion we've ever had for a topic in a podcast this season. Let us know down below what you guys think of this discussion. But you want to say one more thing? I know you do.
And we just hope, I know you're with me on this one, Ricky. We hope that we opened a door for a really good discussion amongst all of our fans, because you guys are fans of so many different teams. And that's what we love, that we have a lot of diversity within the sports, and our viewership and listenership. So we really want to hear from you. Not even if you think that we're wrong or right, but what you think too that you would be doing, who you would be putting in, and the type of case you are making for them. So please let us know. We'd love to have discussions down below. Very logical and really good back and forth discussions. If you want to call us, idiots and stuff like that, save it for a different day, because that's not what we're looking for here. We're looking for some good discussion, even if you do think we are wrong. It's fine to disagree. You can do it in a nice way, though.